Alright, let's dive into something that's been stirring up the internet lately. Emily Wilson, the renowned translator of the Odyssey, has some thoughts about Christopher Nolan's film adaptation. And honestly, her critique is as sharp as it is fascinating. So, let's break this down, because it's not just about a scholar calling out a director, it's about the clash of interpretations, the weight of ancient texts, and what it means to adapt a story for modern audiences. First off, what's the big deal? Wilson takes issue with Nolan's portrayal of Zeus Law, or Xenia, the ancient Greek code of hospitality. In her eyes, Nolan's film twists this concept, framing Odysseus's Trojan Horse as the ultimate violation of divine law. But here's where it gets interesting. Wilson argues that this interpretation misses the point. Personally, I think what makes this really interesting is how it highlights the tension between fidelity to the source material and creative license. Nolan's Zeus seems to take a hardline stance against deceit, which feels almost modern. Like, it's as if the film is projecting contemporary moral anxieties onto an ancient text. But is that a bad thing? Or is it just a different lens? One thing that immediately stands out is Wilson's point about the Trojan Horse. She argues that the film frames the horse as a breaking point for civilization, but she questions why deception, in a war, is the focus, rather than the war itself. And honestly, she's got a point. If you take a step back and think about it, the Greeks and Trojans were enemies, not hosts and guests. So, why is the horse the moral crux? What this really suggests is that Nolan might be using the Trojan horse as a metaphor for something bigger, maybe about the costs of deception in modern society. But Wilson's critique forces us to ask, does that metaphor hold up when you strip away the historical context? What many people don't realize is that adaptations are always acts of translation. Wilson, as a translator herself, knows this better than anyone. Her 2017 translation of the Odyssey was a landmark for its accessibility and modernity, and Nolan cited it as an influence. But here's the irony: Wilson's translation emphasizes the psychological and emotional depth of the text, which she feels Nolan's film lacks. From my perspective, this isn't just a critique of the film, it's a defense of the original text's complexity. Wilson seems to be saying, look, the Odyssey isn't just a story about gods and heroes, it's about the human condition. And if the film reduces that, it's missing the point. A detail I find fascinating is Wilson's comparison of Nolan's Odyssey to a Trojan horse itself. She calls it a kind of Trojan horse, a film that claims to champion human kindness but ultimately prioritizes spectacle over substance. This raises a deeper question: what do we want from adaptations? Should they stay true to the original's themes, or is it enough to capture its spirit? Personally, I think Wilson's critique is a call for art that's truthful, not just visually stunning, but emotionally and intellectually honest. In a world drowning in misinformation, that's a powerful statement. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room: Wilson's expertise. She's a Homeric scholar, not a filmmaker. Does that matter? In my opinion, it does, and it doesn't. Yes, filmmaking is its own craft, and Nolan's a master of it. But the Odyssey isn't just any story, it's a cultural cornerstone. Wilson's perspective matters because she spent her career studying its nuances. At the same time, art is subjective. Nolan's interpretation might not align with hers, but does it have to? What makes this really interesting is how it forces us to grapple with the idea of ownership over stories. Who gets to decide what the Odyssey means? If you take a step back and think about it, this debate isn't just about a film or a translation, it's about how we engage with the past. Wilson's critique is a reminder that ancient texts aren't static, they're living, breathing entities that we constantly reinterpret. Nolan's Odyssey might not be her Odyssey, but that's kind of the point. Adaptations are conversations, not monologues. And in that conversation, Wilson's voice is a vital one. So, where does this leave us? Personally, I think Wilson's critique is less about tearing down Nolan's film and more about lifting up the original text. She's challenging us to think critically about what we value in storytelling. Is it spectacle? Emotional depth? Fidelity to the source? There's no right answer, but the question itself is worth exploring. What this really suggests is that the Odyssey, whether in Homer's words, Wilson's translation, or Nolan's film, is a story that still has the power to provoke, inspire, and divide. And honestly, that's exactly what great art should do. So, what do you think? Is Nolan's Odyssey a brilliant reinterpretation or a missed opportunity? Does Wilson's critique hold water, or is she overstepping? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear your take. Because at the end of the day, that's what makes this conversation so fascinating. There's no one right way to tell a story. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point.